So for those of you who don't know me, hi, my name is David Elcock. I am the director of the Northwest Skills Development Network, and I've been involved in accreditation for a very long time now. Without going into too much detail, the system that we're now using at One NHS Finance has its roots in the Northwest. We started doing this over 20 years ago now, so it's great that it's rolled out across to the rest of the country. What I will say is that if I'm just looking around the screen, there's nobody from the Northwest on the call yet. We do have a slightly different process in the Northwest, which I won't go into in detail. It doesn't affect any of you. So we have a 2-hour session lined up. We'll try and grab a break around about 10 to 1, just for a few minutes. What I would ask is that if you want to ask a question, I would suggest that Graham is with us. He's going to do a session for us on his hospital, his trust process through the accreditation. I would suggest that we wait until the end of the session to ask questions, because if you ask questions as you're going along, often they get picked up during the course of the presentation. So just put your hand up towards the end of Graham's session and any of mine and Amy's, and we'll pick those questions up. What I would ask is, if you do ask a question, if you could please put your camera on when you're speaking to us, that would be nice, just so we know who you are and where you are. And we will take it from there. As Natasha has said in the chat, we are recording the session for future use, and certainly I will be sending copies of my slides for Natasha to distribute. I'm sure Graham and the other speakers will do so as well, because that's always helpful to have. So with no further ado, I shall pass you over to Graham Holmes, who is the Head of Finance Transformation at University Hospitals Leicester NHS Trust, and he's going to talk you through their recent process to their level 3 accreditation. So Graham, thanks for joining us, and over to you, sir.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. As David said, I'm Graham Holmes, the Head of Finance for Transformation at University Hospitals Leicester, which I'll call UHL because it's quite a long name otherwise on there. And I'm as well as the joys of looking after the efficiency program at the trust, I also lead on ONF and skills development and that within our trust. So what I'm going to go through today is a bit about our journey, about the process we went through, some of our experiences with it, some of the evidence we shared, and some of the benefits we got from it. And then, yeah, any questions, just ask me at the end, like David said there. Brill. So I think I am obliged to go through the little bit about Leicester first. So Leicester is a trust. It's a big trust made of 3 big hospitals. The Leicester Royal Infirmary is the biggest one, but we also have big sites at Glenfield Hospital and the Leicester General Hospital on there. I think we are the largest employer in Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland, with 18,000 colleagues on their 1.5 billion organisation. And you can see there the size of our bed base and number of attendances we have each year in there. So yeah, big hospital, over 3 large sites. We've also got a really good reputation when it comes to our research, and we specialise in things like cardiovascular and respiratory medicine on there. We've also recently entered into a partnership with Northamptonshire NHS Group, so it's Northampton General and Kettering General hospitals, and we're working increasingly closer with them. So a little bit of the background of where UHL was before it began the ONF process on here, and essentially it was in a really bad place. We'd obviously made national headlines with mysterious deficits in our position. And when we were placed in the recovery support programme by NHS England, it wasn't just a case of bad accounting. There was also huge cultural issues within the team as well, and that was the 1920 financial year on there. So the finance team was in a really bad place. So I joined the trust in 2022. And huge improvements had been made by the time I joined on there. The team had worked really hard to get where they'd got to. But we had no accreditation with any of the professional bodies supporting the CPD, and we had no ONF accreditation. Now, I had come from University Hospitals of Coventry and Warwickshire, which was heavily invested in the ONF programme. In fact, David came to talk to us at one point about the benefits of it, and I'd helped get UHCW to level 2 accreditation there, and they in the last 12 months they've also achieved their level 3. So I'd seen the benefits of it, about how it can push a team to be the best it can be on there, and I was keen to see what we could do on there. But obviously, being the position Leicester was in, that wasn't our main motivation for engaging in the program. What our main motivation was trying to do the right thing and become the best team we could be on there. And if you happen to hit the ONF framework, then that was great on there. But what we found as we got into it was actually that ONF framework was really helpful, particularly on our cultural issues, in providing a guide as to how to do it on there. So part of it is about getting started, and I know you're training for assessors today, so you'll come and get it at the end of the process. But I think it's important to understand the start of the process, to understand the journeys that the trusts have been on. So to start with, senior support is really key to this, because if you haven't got your CFO's buy-in, you really haven't got a leg to stand on from the start. And since I joined, I've had 2 CFOs, so Lorraine Hooper and Lee Bond, both excellent CFOs and big supporters of the ONF program. In fact, when Lee joined us last year, I think almost one of the first things we made him do was sign the CFO declaration on there, just to emphasise how important it was. Leicester is also very fortunate in that we have a deputy CFO whose job is to look after people and team development. And I appreciate that's a fairly unusual post, and not every trust will have that. But it certainly made coordination and bouncing ideas off and sharing things around a lot easier. And I think the thing as well is that this is a journey by a team. It's not a journey of one person. So when you're assessing a whole team. You're not just assessing the individual, the key contact that you're dealing with. And no one person can complete that accreditation process on their own. They've got to make use of their own teams, their own skills development groups. But what we found as well, but by going through the assessment process, was that we were also able to talk more closely with our system colleagues, because they were going on the same journey, and linking with the ONF community, and come to things like this and make other presentations about changes we were making on there. And it opened up a whole new series of doors for us and contacts and that with it. And one thing we found as we went through our assessment process is that we were also able to share things with our assessors that weren't happening in their own trusts, and we were able to share ideas that way. And one thing we found as well is that you don't have to be excellent at everything. I think a huge part of that assessor process, and I appreciate this, is as accountants, it's not the answer we like because we like things to be definitive, is there's very much the spirit of how something feels, rather than, have you tick box A, B, and C. And I say that here with it because we've got an example in ours where obviously a huge part of the assessment, or a big part of it, is about how we communicate with each other, how we share information. And when we were going through our level 1 and 2 assessments, we were big on newsletters. We'd just set up a newsletter and everyone was contributing to it. However, it wasn't for us. It died off. People weren't committed to it. It just didn't work for UHL. But and going through level 3, we were open and honest, and we shared this, and we covered it in other ways because, you know, Lee takes on now, he does like a weekly team email, and we call them engagement sessions, where everyone from finance and procurement is invited along to a Teams meeting and things like that. But what was key to us in particularly in the level 3 part of our assessment was showing the journey that actually we tried this idea, wasn't for us, but we'd, you know, made up for it in other ways, or found other alternatives that covered the same thing on there. And I think that's probably an important message, is there's no one strict answer with all this. Um, and I think the thing as well is as I keep saying, it's a journey, and it takes a number of years to go through that level 1, 2, 3 process. So when you're assessing it, you're not just assessing the work that's gone on in the last 2, 3 months. You're assessing potentially 3 to 5 years worth of work that a trust has put in. And I think that's important as assessors as well, because, you know, you're going to come in 2 or 3 of you, and I think you do need 2 or 3 people to look at it, because of this. Hopefully by the time you get into level 3, the sheer volume of evidence and complexity in that, and you need to bounce things around and that as well. So setting up, so from the trust point of view, they need to have a lead for the ONF accreditation program. For UHL, that was me, and I acted as the key contact for the assessors throughout the process. And I think that's helpful to have that one key contact. It's like going through your end of year audit. You tend to have one contact you go through, and they filter out the queries, questions to whoever they need to go to on there. And having that single point of contact just really helps keep things in order. And certainly what we did was we had an initial setup meeting with our assessors, went through, you know, who was on annual leave when, and all the practicalities and things like that. Make sure that yours as an assessor understanding is up to date, but also the body you're assessing is up to date. Make sure they've used the latest accreditation pack, because they do evolve and change. We certainly noticed a lot of changes between level 2 and 3 in there, and the guidance that supports it is really helpful. So do make use of that on there. Timescales, yeah, I think being realistic about timescales is important, both from an assessor and the body being assessed point of view on there. So from being the body that's being assessed, you've got to remember how long it does take to put these packs together. You know, you're completing this, you're putting evidence together, you're reviewing it, you're talking it through with your colleagues, and you're doing that generally on top of your regular, you know, month-end duties or planning or anything like that on there as well. So it does take time to get things right on there. And I think the thing as well is, you know, you've got to make sure you leave, I think, at least 2 months for assessment to be done properly on the, you know, the assessment isn't every day for 2 months, it ebbs and flows, but I think you need that time to, you know, get your assessors have that initial review of the evidence. They're going to come back with queries, you're going to need to respond, you know, they need to make a decision, and then by that point they're also going to need to write their report, and then you know, give you that to review, and then submit that to the Finance Leadership Council on there. So we worked backwards from it. You know, the submission deadline was the 30th of April, so we needed our assessors really start on the start of February, and that kind of thing just helps sorry, make things a lot smoother for everyone. And documentation. So again, I think as a body that's being assessed, it for me, again, with that audit process, keep it simple. Keep your evidence in a way, in a format that is easily accessible. So we set up a Teams channel, a SharePoint channel for our assessors, on there. We could grant them access to that channel. We organised the evidence in a logical way. So, we'd have section 1, section 2, and then it would be, 1.1a, 1.1b on there, and then the evidence would be in there as well. I think one of the things that I think, because we fell into this trap more with level 2 than level 3, but one of the things to be aware of as an assessor is that the organisation might think, because you tend to use evidence to cover more than one point, sometimes, certainly level 2, we thought because we'd put something in 1.1a, the assessors would automatically know it was there when they were looking at 2.6e or whatever, and that's not the case. Sometimes you might have to get the bodies to duplicate that evidence, because if you're going in as a team, you're not necessarily all looking at the same sections and things like that. So yeah, that was something we fell into, but might be worth making the bodies you're assessing aware of that as well on there. So you've got the journey itself. So it it is comprehensive, and it does cover all areas of a finance team. So yes, there is the technical part about, do you have a scheme of delegation and standing financial instructions, but it also covers training, your development, how you interact with non-finance staff, how you interact with the bodies outside the organization, how you talk to each other, how you look after each other on there. So it is a fully comprehensive assessment of a team. Level 1 obviously is a self-assessment process, but you still need to put that evidence together. So certainly when we were going through that level 1 process, we did our SharePoint folder and that, and we still put the evidence in there. For our own security and our own knowledge that what we were writing was real on there as well. And then we achieved that in 2022, and we moved quite swiftly because of the progress we'd made, particularly from 1920 on to level 2. Obviously, by the time we got to there, we were coming to the end of all the COVID restrictions and all that, but a lot of them were still in place. So our level 2 assessment was carried out entirely virtually. So we met with our assessors over Teams and things like that, and then we were approved by the Finance Leadership Council on there in the 2023. And then I appreciate this isn't the better copy, but actually this was a really proud moment for us as a trust achieving this level 2. And we got this, or Lorraine, our CFO at the time, got this letter from Peter Ridley, who was the deputy chair of the FLC at the time, just saying how, because we'd gone through this process, the how much it had showed that UHL had moved on, how much UHL had grown, and I have to be honest, Lorraine shared this with all of us, and it was a very, very proud moment for us, because it showed that the work we were doing was paying off on there. And then we overreached ourselves. We pushed ourselves too hard, and we're a little bit silly, to be honest. So we were, oh yeah, we've achieved level 2, right? Let's go for level 3 straight away on there. And I know F quite rightly stopped us and went, no. Level 3 is much more complicated. It's much more of a journey. We're not just looking that you've started things, or that things are being developed. We're looking for things to be embedded. We're looking for how things feel as much as what they are. And I mean, obviously at the time I was like, oh, what are they doing? But actually, having gone through the process, they were exactly right on this. I think if we'd have gone for level 3 straight away, we probably would have ticked the boxes. We would have had all the documentation. But did we feel like a level 3 organisation? And I don't think we did at the time. And that's really what I'm trying to say with that second point there, is that what we've written is just as important as how it feels. You know, a journey does take time. And I think this is one of the things as well, and I'll come on to it in a bit of a later slide, is that we call them conversations, but the conversations that the assessors have with 25% of the work of the team is almost equally, I think, arguably more important than the physical evidence that's on the SharePoint site, because that's where you've got the opportunity to demonstrate things. You know, yes, we've probably all got a training and development policy, but are we living it? Do people have access to it? Do they make use of it? And the same with things like PDRs and things like that. And it's only by talking to the team you're gonna know that, and you know how an organization feels. Um, but you might have to, again, I'll come on to it later, but getting them set up really quickly is key as well. And hopefully your key contact has already started that. And I say that because for like a big trust like us, where our, because we're finance and procurement, our team is circa 200. So they had to talk to about 50 people. Um, and herding 50 accountants into a room, or herding 50 accountants, is not always the easiest task to do on there. So yeah, it's worth a bit of organisation on that. And the thing as well, but certainly by the time you get into level three, is you've got to remember that this is an organisation that's now been on this journey for 3 to 5 years. Um, so it's, you know, they're going to have had a real battle to have kept that momentum up, to keep that focus on ONF, so that they'll have made a huge effort to do this, because we all know, you know, just from our day jobs, things come and go. You have the peaks and troughs and that kind of thing. So to keep that momentum going shows a real serious level of commitment from the organisation on there. And it also shows that it's not just one person, it is that whole team approach. Um, so our level three review happened this year, earlier this year, which we passed. It was a virtual and physical review on there. So a lot of the evidence and the conversations were assessed virtually, but for the conversations, the team came physically into the hospital to meet with people, and talk to them and see how we felt as an organisation. Very, very tough, but you know, fair, and we passed that. We were quite lucky as well that, I don't know if anyone knows Jodie Martin from Norfolk. She assessed us at level 2 and level 3, so she had a little bit of background knowledge about our trust as well coming into level 3, which was helpful as well. So we've got the evidence that we submitted on here, and I think what I tried to do with this list, because I was looking at what had been, you know, made done in some of these presentations before, and I know people have listed every single piece of evidence that they've gone through, but I think that for me that wasn't as important as really conveying the message that the evidence can be anything. On here, the evidence will come in a wide variety of forms. So it will be things like emails. So emails are a huge one for us, because you know, probably the same as you guys, we get trust communications. The chief executive writes to us every Friday. You know, evidence of meetings. Well, you know, if you can share, you know, an agenda or an invite, that's key on there. We regularly send out training reminders, you know, FSD courses that are, you know, underbooked or undersubscribed, and trying to get out there. Training and development opportunities, and also a key one, monitoring of mandatory training and PDR completion and things like that tend to be done through email. So emails is a key source of evidence. I don't think it will come as any surprise that policy documents are ones you can always add in. So scheme of delegation, SFIs, but also there might be some more local policy ones, like the flexible working policy. Certainly for us, that is a finance one supported by the trust as a whole. And then policy documents like your green plans, well, they certainly ours is a system level, so it doesn't just cover University Hospitals Leicester, it also covers our ICB and Leicester Partnership Trust as well. So they'll have policy documents. They won't necessarily have originated in their organisation, but they'll be a key part of it. Videos and presentations. We submitted a lot of these as well. We have I don't know what other organisations do. The third UHL, the third Thursday of every month, Thursday afternoon, we have a training session where we invite finance colleagues along. It can be on a variety of things. Sometimes it'll be technical stuff, a new IFRS or something, but sometimes it'll be, what makes a good PDR. But we record them, share the videos. So the videos can be a key thing in there as well. YouTube, we submitted a vast array of evidence on YouTube. So things like if this recording today ends up on YouTube, we'll probably be using that in 3 years' time as a, yes, look, we supported ONF with this. And yeah, we've done some presentations about our budget holder training, our CFO award scheme, and that had been put on the ONF YouTube channel, and we shared the link just to show there. Certificates, so prizes and awards that have been won or shared. So UHL, as we've gone through this process, has picked up a number of awards. So certainly, like for HFMA East Midlands, we became Finance Team of the Year. We also won a placement scheme award from the University of Leicester and De Montfort University on there, and we could share them certificates. On there, we also had the HFMA East Midlands Student of the Year and things like that. And so them certificates are key to showing how we grow and develop. Photographs as well. When we have away days, we take lots of photos. We tend to have stands at them. So there was one year where me and one of my colleagues did an ONF stand at our away day. So we took pictures of that. Chief exec came along, so we were able to show that whole trust support. And each year, our main away day, usually in December, we have like a annual prize award presentations on there. So again, show photographs of them on there. Although I have to be honest, it was quite funny last year, our prize awards, because the charity had ordered us some nice prizes, but they sent us the wrong ones, and we ended up with awards for a dog show instead. So we ended up awarding like best in breed and things like that for our accountants. But yeah, and meetings as well. So I don't know about other organisations, but what we did was invite our assessors to attend some of our meetings. So we invited them to our senior management team meeting. We invited them to our team huddle or engagement event, whatever you guys want to call it. We invited them to some of our other confirm and challenge meetings, our heads of finance meetings, our band 7 meetings on there. They couldn't make them all, and sometimes only one would go instead of all 3. But it shows a level of openness. We were trying to show a level of openness and honesty and transparency. And again, it's back to how it feels. That discussion in SMT says, is it just the CFO going, right, this is what will happen, or is he listening to his deputies and that kind of thing on there? And back to how it feels. And the next one is a really key one, and we did fall into this trap a little bit, is particularly when you get into level 3, you're also assessing what an organisation did at level 1 and 2. And so you've got to make sure that they did keep their evidence up to date for them areas. Now, I have to be honest, when I was compiling this, I misinterpreted the guidance on this, and I read it as, level 2 was standalone, and then we would show the journey from level 2 in level 3. So it wasn't particularly a big error to time consuming, but wasn't a particularly big error to correct, because all it meant was, I'd probably put the evidence in level 3. I had to make sure it was in level 2 as well for me, but actually making sure that level 1 and 2 evidence is there and is still current as well. And that in particular was how we were able to demonstrate that journey with our newsletter of actually in level 1 and 2 it plays a big part, but not by level 3, and that's because we'd found on the journey it didn't work. And the introductory document as well. So this is the document compiled by the organisation saying, a little bit about them, like I did at the start, and why they want to be part of this, and a few things like that. Now that is a key piece of evidence as well. So we were able to put in things like our organisational structure, some of the history of UHL and the journey and steps we'd taken, the awards we'd won, and things like that. And so it really is a key piece of data all in one, 5-ish page document to keep you going on there. And of course, for level 3, it also has the recommendation not only by the CFO but by the chief exec and your medical. Well, for us it was a medical consultant, but your like your non-finance recommendation as well. And I think just with that last point, what we found as well was in our submission, which we really welcomed, was our assessors pushed us. Our assessors pushed us to give more, because a lot of the things that we just thought were business as usual weren't business as usual. We'd put time and effort into getting them there, and they were like, tell us the story, tell us what you've done on there. So that was really a really good challenge from our assessors, was actually pushing us to go, we've seen in the conversations you're doing this, put it down on there. And yeah, the conversations, like I say, these are a key part, and I think these are probably the most important part of getting it, because it shows what's being lived by the organisation, what happens on a day-to-day basis. Does a team feel like a team or a collection of individuals on there? And one piece of advice I'd give you as assessors, particularly for level 3, but probably the same for level 2 with the CFO, is almost the first thing you need to do is arrange that meeting with the CEO and CFO straight away, because their diaries are the most impossible to get into. Certainly our chief exec changed the meeting 2 or 3 times because of, he was summoned by NHSE or whoever on there, and so it's really important to get them in place as quick as you can on there. And I don't think there's a set rule about whether them conversations are virtual or in person. So we had both experiences. For level 2, it was virtual. For level 3, it was in person. I think it just depends on your appetite as assessors. I would suggest if you're in Norfolk or somewhere, you might not want to travel down to Devon or Cornwall for your assessment conversations, but I think it's a case of practicality on there. I think in person is better. I think as an assessed body, everyone who takes part in that feels more part of it. And I think as an assessor, it's easier to read a room. You read body language better in a physical setting on there. Meet with about 25% of the team. Like I say, this was a bit of a challenge for us because that was 50 people, which is quite a large number to get in one place, particularly for a whole day on there and that. So yeah, and I've just put a little bit about our approach in there. So we set them up at the start of the assessment. We included volunteers from all over finance because we wanted to show, we are a team on there. And I know historically these things can be very financial management led, but we wanted to make sure we had colleagues from finance systems, from capital, financial accounting, procurement in there as well. And cover all bands as well. This was a key one for us because we do a lot of training. We have our placement students. We make use of apprenticeships. We do leadership training and all that. So we wanted to give our students chance to think, as well as the leaders at the band sevens and eights and that as well. So we wanted to show all bands there as well. And as well as that, in the conversations, you also have to have, you'd also have to meet with budget holders or non-finance colleagues. And again, what we did, which I think from what our assessor said was a little bit different, was we included our budget holders in the meetings with our finance colleagues. Now, we did this because we wanted to show actually we have a good relationship with our budget holders, and actually we're able to talk all from the same page together, and we're not afraid of hiding anything in there as well. And I think the thing as well with them conversations, I haven't put it down here, is they have to be open and honest. There will be some things in there that won't be good. There'll be some things in there that are absolutely brilliant, and it's just about being open about where we are with things. And then so we've completed our level 3 assessment now, and a few weeks ago we actually got the letter from NHS England just to say that obviously not just as a result of ONF, but a big part of it, where we're taken out of the recovery support program. So a journey that UHL has been on for about 5-6 years, supported by ONF, has had a really positive conclusion on there, and that's through our own hard work, but also the assessment process that pushed us to be better on so yeah, just finish off with some conclusions on there. So it is, I keep saying it, but it is a journey. It takes a number of years, so it does show the hard work and dedication of an organisation to be the best they can be. The evidence can come in many shapes and forms. Almost anything you can think of is evidence on there. It's not just written down stuff, it's videos, it's pictures, that kind of thing. Organizations like ours will be modest and forget that they're doing things that's business as usual, and they'll need that pushing, poking and prodding to get things down on there. Organizations, won't be perfect at everything. They'll be stronger in some areas, and some parts will fit better with an organization than others on there. So just because someone hasn't ticked the box perfectly actually doesn't mean what they've put in isn't relevant and isn't enough to pass on there. And then the conversations are a key part of demonstrating that organisation, and how an organisation feels really is just as important as what's the physical evidence suggests on there. And that was about it from me. So has anyone got any questions or anything they want to go through on there?
Graham, I'll just jump in quickly. Thank you. That was absolutely fascinating and bang on time as well. So thanks for that. Much appreciated. I have got a couple of questions, but I'll let colleagues pick up their questions first. So Rebecca, you've got your hand up.
Thanks, and thanks, Graham. That was really interesting and helpful. I'm just wondering about kind of, is there any discussion about like the scope of the finance department and what we're going to look at the start? Because obviously you've included procurement, but every CFO has a different combination. Yeah.
It does. We had to have this conversation, particularly for level 3. We went with finance and procurement because that felt like the right area for us. But actually, our one is actually finance, procurement, and supplies. So obviously, we have the people making sure that all the wards are fully stocked and that kind of thing. And we did exclude them from the assessment, and yet that will vary because I think some finance teams have got like IT or IM&T, whatever you want to call them, digital in there as well, and it probably wouldn't be relevant for the digital colleagues to be involved in some of them discussions. So yeah, we did have that scoping discussion.
Thank you.
Thanks, Graham. I was on a
Sarah?
meeting yesterday
Sorry.
when we spent 25 minutes in the meeting today discussing what the digital team should be called, whether it was digital and data,
Ah,
digital data
yes,
technology. It's so tedious.
that's
Sarah, you've got a question.
Yeah, and thanks, Graham. That's really good. I think I'm probably thinking not from an assessor point of view, but more of trying to encourage colleagues to be part of the programme of work to achieve the accreditation. We're really early in the stages. Is there any real tangible benefits that you've seen that I can really promote to our staff? Because, you know, you've said all along, it's not one person's, it's really hard for one person to drive it. And I'm finding that, and I need to kind of really encourage staff to be involved, and they kind of, it's whether there's some real good tangible benefits that I can sort of hang this
Well,
on
I
to.
think this is where our approach was key to it. I think because what we were trying to do was, I know this sounds a bit bizarre, we were not trying to pass the ONF assessment. The way we sold it to our team was, we are trying to be the best team we can be. You know, if there's something wrong in our team, let's share it, and let's be open about it, and let's talk about it and see what the solution is, and that. And if it just so happens to fit the ONF assessment, then that's great on there. And that was how we sold it on there. And I think that the tangible benefits for us of being increased openness, increased increased feeling of being a team, that open communication. I mean, when Lee, our CFO, has his as the we call them engagement events, team huddles, whatever you want to call them, on there, you know, we regularly get 120 plus people on there, on that. And by the time you factor in things like annual leave and people have been summoned to other meetings, actually that's quite a high turnout on there. I mean, I think you probably will end up in the position where you end up with the same, probably 6 to 12 people who volunteer for everything being the leads, but that's the start point. And I think I would get something like your engagement events set up and going, because that's a great opportunity to talk to each other, get ideas, and do it that way.
Thank you. That's great. I think, yeah, he really made a good point around the not just hanging it on the accreditation. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, I'd agree with Graham that I think if you set about seeing the getting the accreditation as an end in itself, that's not necessarily the most beneficial way to do this. I think it is a part of a process of showing that you're good at what you are doing as an organisation. Graham, I have got a couple of points. Are you going to hang around for my session after the around 1 o'clock-ish? Because if so, I can pick them up there. That's probably going to be easier.
Yeah, I can do. It's
okay.
up to you.
That's great. Just things like I'm intrigued how you were able to pick the staff who the assessor spoke to, rather than I'd always say the assessors should do that. But we'll pick that up in my session after the break if that's okay.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, great, thank you. I've been trying desperately to think of a suitable analogy around the dog show. Whether you were best in breed or the dog with the waggiest tail, I'm not sure. But thank you. That was really helpful. Really fascinating insight. I will cover some of the same ground in my session after the break around what a good assessment process looks like. But you've covered so much of the ground already. I can make my session much shorter. So thank you. That's really helpful.
No problem.
Great stuff. So I'm just going to do a very quick session now on what we're looking for in our assessors. And then we'll take a break after that, and then we'll pick up my views on the process. And I've seen that Amy's joined us, and Amy's going to talk about what she's gained from being an assessor in her sphere. So I will just share my screen with you very quickly. Hopefully colleagues can see that slide now. If someone can just give me a thumbs up, that would be great. Yep, thank you. So just very quickly, what we're looking for from a One NHS Finance point of view in our assessors, and what skills I think and colleagues in One NHS Finance think you need if you're going to help us with the assessments. We are, of course, grateful for anybody who comes forward. There are some skills that we think you need to do that. So really, we are looking for relatively senior colleagues to do the work with us. You should work in some kind of a strategic role. We deliberately don't say you have to be at a particular level or of a particular band, because we recognize that people have different experiences, and these days different organizations are so varied in the way that their bandings work. But we do think you need to have been in a relatively senior post, as much around your credibility with the organization that you're assessing as much as anything else. I think it might be a bit weird if a band 2 was sitting down sort of telling a financial director where they'd gone wrong in their processes. So we would say you need to be relatively senior. I also think it's essential that you've got a breadth of experience and an understanding of what being a finance professional in NHS means. Not necessarily having had experience of every single sector of the NHS finance world, but at least understanding what the different parts of our profession do in their work. I think it's really key that you are a self-confident person and you are able to push back and challenge occasionally when you're doing an assessment. It sounds as if from Graham's experience, which is really good to hear, that actually the assessors were saying there's more evidence here than you're pulling out in your report. You're better at things than you think you are. Sometimes you need to stand up. That's a little bit aggressive. You need to be able to stand firm with people and say, actually, we need more evidence here. We're not sure that what you've said provides all the evidence that we need, and can you please provide that for us? So it's not about being aggressive. It's not about thinking that you're right, but it's having that self-confidence to stand up to some senior colleagues, possibly within your own patch, and saying, we just need a bit more around this, please. So that can be quite difficult to do, but if you do it in the right way, it can be very beneficial for both parties. I think it goes without saying that you need to have a knowledge of the process. Graham has mentioned, I'll pick up in my next presentation, the process does change. There is some really good guidance that colleagues have written. So being aware of that, if you're going to be an assessor, I think is absolutely essential, and being aware of the latest processes as well. We've got a meeting of the national group coming up in October. We may change one or two of the criteria in that meeting. It's not for me to say, but we are discussing some of them. But you just need to make sure that you're aware of those, and the central team will always let you know when some of the criteria have changed. One thing we're very careful to do in that process is to make sure that we don't impact on organisations who are halfway through the process. So if you're already halfway through and the criteria change, we won't ask you to change that particular part of the process. Ideally, we'd like to be from an accredited organisation. As Graham has just made clear, I think once you've been through the process yourself, you have a much better understanding of what's involved. You're probably a bit more sympathetic, and Graham was very clear on that having an understanding of what the process is like as someone who's being assessed can really help you as an assessor. And I think, again, to go back to Graham's point, if you've been assessed yourself, it's easy to say that colleagues have got really good evidence in their portfolio that they can share or push more forcibly in their documents. I think it goes without saying, and I appreciate I'm talking to a group of accountants here, that you need to be detailed and methodological. I don't think that's a problem for most of us, but you really can't approach this in a scattergun way. You've got to go through it in a very detailed way and make sure you're picking up each of the points. Graham made reference to not reflecting where bits of evidence cover more than one of the criteria, and I think that's an example of where, if you have this detailed approach, you probably do it a little bit more aware that something that an organisation has put down for one piece of evidence, one piece of evidence for one criteria, can match something else as well, and that's really helpful to be able to do that as well. And then I think finally, for me, for this section, you do need to have an enthusiasm. You do need to be willing to commit. I'll talk about the timeframes that are involved in my next session, but there is a commitment there. We are very much aware at the moment that things are tough in NHS finance, and people's time is very short supply. So you need to be able to commit to that. I think I would say this, wouldn't I? But I think it can be a good break for you from some of the more hectic bits of your work, if you can just take a step away and go and visit another organisation and see what they're doing that's really good, and take that back into your organisation. So that's it for me in terms of what we're looking for for an assessor. Hopefully you recognise yourself in those things that I've said there. Does anyone have any questions about that? Rebecca?
Oh yeah, thanks, David. Just a couple. When you say ideally you should be from an accredited organisation, do you mean a level two? So you've been through it. But
yes, I mean that would be the ideal. But really,
right.
if you're from a level one organisation, that's fine. And to be honest, Rebecca, we will take people who are not whose organisations aren't assessed, because there's a need for numbers. But we'd expect you to have been through this training and everything else. So you guys will have that particular string to your bow by having been to this session today.
And then just like you might not be able to answer this, but I'm kind of quite conscious that you could get to level 3 level of accreditation, but your organisation's financial position could be deteriorating. And how does an assessor deal with that sort of situation? Because something's still not working. You could tick all of the boxes. No, it's not tick box exercise, but something's still not working, and that is, that can potentially put the assessor in, I don't know, a bit of a difficult position maybe.
I'll let Graham come back on that first, and then if I have anything to add, I will do so.
I was going to say, because that is the position my organisation is in. We're forecasting a 60 million deficit for this year and things like that. Our financial position is atrocious on there. But what the assessment was about is, how do we go about that? Are we communicating that to those charged with governance? Are we sharing it with the board? Are we open in how that financial position is being portrayed and what people can do about it? So we had things like our chief exec does a video every Friday lunchtime. Well, a couple of them have been on finance and the actions people can take about the position. Lee, our CFO, in his comms with the finance team at the end of each month, gives a rundown of, right, here is the month-end position and what's driving it. So even though our financial position is bad, our processes about how we're talking about it and how we're sharing it are correct. And that was what the assessment was not so much, your position's awful. It was more about, yes, your position's awful, but the way you're talking about it, the way you're sharing it, the way you're open about it is right.
Thanks, Graham.
I'm glad I let you go first, Graham. So I've got nothing to add. No, that's really absolutely. We're not. The assessment isn't about the organisation's financial position. It's about how it treats its staff, how it develops its staff, the processes that are in place. I think if it is down to financial position, there'd be no trusts in the Northwest would be accredited at the moment. So we have to kind of have a realistic approach to that.
I suppose I was just thinking, in the current context where, like the current league table is very black and white, isn't it, in terms of kind of what you can, where you can be. And I do agree with you. There are two different things, but it might be a few difficult kind of conversations, I guess. Thank you.
Graham made a very good point about accountants' worlds tend to be black and white, and there is actually quite a lot of grey in this process, and that's one reason why I like it, because it gives you some flexibility and some ability to take a slightly different approach. Sarah.
Hey, David. I was just thinking that, like you were saying, you may get into sort of difficult conversations, and it's just whether you have do you have a cohort of assessors that, if I was an assessor, I could reach out to that cohort and ask for maybe some support or advice? Is that something that you put in place?
Yeah, so there's you're never on your own. There's always at least 2 assessors. We try to get 3 if we can, but that's not always easy. And then there is a group of us who will be available to support you if necessary. I have to say, in all my years of doing this, I only know of one occasion when a trust has pushed back quite hard against an assessor's views. It's not a regular thing, but just every now and then you might need to sort of, as I say, stand up for yourself. But yes, you'll get support from the One NHS finance team, myself, the national group. There's always been Jodie, who Graham referred to. There's a few of us who will support you through that process.
Great, thank you.
Okay, I'm conscious it's just before 1 o'clock. I did promise you a break, so shall we just take a quick break? People can go and get a cup of tea, glass of water, whatever. We'll restart at 1:05, and we will still finish on time, I promise. So let's reconvene at 1:05. Thank you. So without any further ado, let's push on. So what I'm going to talk about today is the outlines there on the screen, and Graham has already picked up lots of these areas in his presentation. So gathering the initial evidence, agreeing that evidence with the organisations, the visit, and Graham's talked at length about that, the outcome of the process, and then the report. So I'll go through these at quite a pace. Again, if you could just save any questions to the end, because I've probably answered some of your questions as we're going through, but there will be time for questions at the end. So the first stage of this is the initial evidence pro forma, and Graham has talked about how he and his team pulled that together. I would suggest that you need to have this ready, or the team you're assessing needs to have it ready for you about 2 months before your visit, to give you time to go through the evidence and to review it. Graham made a very strong point that the evidence is for all the relevant levels. So if you're doing level 2, you have to have level 1 and level 2. Level 3, you're assessing all 3 levels. And also it has to be relevant and up-to-date information. And again, I don't want to go over what Graham said, but it's a key point that the level 1 information has to be for the current period as well as the previous periods as well. We've talked about making sure you've got the most up-to-date pro formas. When you get these overheads, that link there will take you to where those are at the present time. Again, Graham, you can see how much time you saved me here. You talked about how to share the information, so I very much recommend using Teams. That seems to be a standard way of doing that now. Smart Sheets is another system that works really well. Occasionally we've used file transfer, but I think Teams these days is pretty much the standard. One thing Graham didn't say, and this is possibly a slight preference of mine, when the organisation is completing their pro forma, I like to see a bit of a narrative. So rather than a simple bullet point saying what information has been included, just a few words to say why that's been included and what it shows around the process, rather than just being a simple list of evidence. I think that does help you as an assessor to understand what it is that's being shown. To pick up on the point that Graham did make, in that narrative you can say, please also see the evidence at criterion whatever, and that will help you pick that up as well. As you're going through the evidence, individually or jointly, you should be noting any missing evidence, any shortfalls, any queries you have, and raise those with the organisation when you have your next discussion, which I'll come to in a moment. There are now some red lines. So NHS Finance have decided that there are some things that you have to have in place at level 1 before you can be assessed at level 2. And I'll come on to those in a moment. But you must make sure as an assessor that those red lines are all covered off. My preferred option around the rating is to use a RAG rating with an additional item. So I don't need to explain what the R, the A, and the G are, but for me, I have a blue rating, which means it looks like the evidence is good. But to pick up Graham's point, I want to discuss that with the team, because Graham and his senior colleagues may have said, yes, everyone's got job descriptions. Yes, they all have appraisals. Yes, they've all got PDPs in place. Then when you go into the organisation and have those discussions, people might say, no, I've not had a job description for 20 years. I've not had an appraisal for the last 3 years. So it's that evidence where it looks good, and in 99% of the occasions it will be good, but you just need to check that with the staff. So that on my pro forma, I record that, I note those as being blue, and then pick those up during the discussions. And then at the bottom of the screen there, just make sure you agree a date by which the revised pro forma, if there are changes, will be resubmitted to you, and I'll come back onto that in a second. So that's how I think you should approach that stage 1. I did say I'd mention the red lines. I won't go through all of these. You'll get a copy of the slides, but each of these criteria have to be in place and have to be being shown in place for an organisation to get level 2, even though they're level 1 criteria. And the One NHS Finance team will make sure that these things have been evidenced before assigning a level 2 assessor to an organisation. So you can see there are 9 of them there. I won't go through them. You'll get the slides, and you can pick those up from that process. Stage 2 is then about a month before the visit. I would suggest at that point you should have a evidence schedule that you're happy with, both you as the assessors and the organisation that you're assessing. It can still be changed, and you might pick things up in the assessment process. There's discussions with staff. Again, to go back to Graham's presentation, and we didn't rehearse honestly, but Graham did pick up some key points from my presentation. You can say to the team, this is really good, why have you not put that in there? Or this is excellent, you really should be highlighting that. One thing that I would say is that in the past, we have occasionally had organisations who've said, oh, yes, we do that, but there's no evidence of it. And if you can't record it in one of the ways that Graham talked about, it's not evidence, so you can't really use that. So I think using agendas is great. I prefer minutes because minutes show that actions have been taken, or action notes from meetings. Videos are great. We often get staff to just write a quick half a side of A4 about the processes they've been through as a trainee or as a student. Anything that's written down is evidence, but you do need to see that evidence in some sort of recorded way. And again, Graham's stolen lots of my thunder here, which is absolutely fine. In terms of the visit, we talked about in-person or via Teams. I would absolutely agree with Graham that an in-person visit is always preferable because you just get a feel for the organisation. You get a feel for what it's like as a place to work. Obviously, if you're in Norfolk and you're assessed to assign somebody in Devon or Cornwall or in Newcastle, that might be tricky. But the NHS finance team will always try and give you an assessment that's relatively local to where you are. On the day, there are a number of meetings that you have to have. I've listed those here. So I would recommend an initial meeting with the team that led the accreditation. You can have your final discussions there about anything that's outstanding. You will need to see the finance director, as Graham said, 25% of the finance team. I don't envy your assessors, Graham, having to see 50 staff. I've got an assessment in train at the moment. I'm seeing 30, and that's enough. So 50 feels a huge number of staff to see. I would say, probably slightly contrary to what Graham said, that you as the assessors should be picking which staff you want to see. So that, and I'm sure Graham didn't do this. You don't put forward all the people who are really, really signed up to NHS Finance, the ones who you know are going to say the right things. You should be picking a cross section of staff, qualified, unqualified, senior, junior, however you want to cut and dice the team up. You need to be picking who you see. Again, Graham hinted at this. It's appropriate to see the teams in groups. You can't possibly have 50 one-to-ones in a visit. It would just be impossible. So see them in groups during the day. You need to see some non-finance staff, 2 budget holders at level 2, 3 at level 3. And for level 3 accreditations, you need to see the chief exec as well. I'm just going to mention Lewisham and Greenwich Trust down in London. When I saw them, they were very, very brave and put forward one of their biggest critics as the budget holder who we interviewed. And actually, it worked really well because they were able to say all the good things the finance team did, despite the concerns they had about them. And that Graham was talking about, it almost not being afraid to pick the rug up and see what's underneath it. And I think that really helped in that particular process. The final meeting on the day should be an outcome meeting, and I'll come to that in a second, where you sit down with the team and let them know where they are in terms of the process. Excuse me. There are a whole list of very useful sample questions in the guidance document that Graham referred to earlier. So it gives you some idea there of the kind of things you should be asking. Again, really important. You're not interviewing people. You're not grilling them. You're having discussions with them about how they think the systems work within their organisation. And if you're meeting in teams, and Graham hinted at this again, I would very strongly recommend you don't have one Teams meeting that lasts the whole day. Set up individual meetings for each group of staff you're going to see. Otherwise, people come in and out of meetings all the time, and it gets very, very distracting. So if you're going to have a couple of Teams meetings, make sure you set them up as separate meetings for the day. I referred to this just now, the outcome meeting. For me, there are 3 potential outcomes. There's a successful review. You're going to recommend the organisation is accredited. There's an almost successful. So you're more or less happy. There's just a couple of things you need to get ticked off before you put the organisation forward for a final sign off. And you can agree that can be done within a couple of weeks, if you have time before the deadline. So going back to Graham's point about working backwards from the submission dates, I'd always allow a week or so before that to pick up any final little issues that might arise. And the final thing for me is not that an organisation has failed its assessment, it's that they're not quite ready yet. Graham used the phrase that they'd passed a couple of times, and from an organisation's point of view, I absolutely get that it feels like passing that assessment and achieving your accreditation. But I would never want an assessor to tell someone they'd failed. It's not that they failed, it's just that they're not quite there at that point. And I would say that you should not leave the organisation on the day of that visit without them being very, very clear about where they stand. Graham talked about the report. They should be written within 2 weeks of the visit, so you need to build that into your timescales. There are 4 parts. There's your report as the assessors, and there's pro forma at Appendix 4. There's the organisational introduction that Graham talked about. That's a really, really important part of the process. There's a final agreed evidence schedule, and that needs to cover all the relevant levels. And there's an employer accreditation pro forma, which just shows where you are in terms of your assessment, your accreditation with SIT for SEMA ACCA. It's really important to recognise that all 4 of those elements are agreed by both parties. So it's not your report on the organisation, it's a report that you've written with the organisation about how they've done in the assessment. The evidence schedule is shared by you and the organisation, so that you're taking joint responsibility for everything that's been written down. And then, as Graham said, that report should be submitted to the ONF team by the relevant deadline, which I've put on the screen there. They're also on the website. A few key factors to pick up. It's a developmental process. I'm going to say it again, it's not pass or fail for the organisation. It's about where they are on their journey. And it was really interesting to hear Graham saying that they went for level 3 too early and realised themselves they weren't ready and took a step back. And I think that's a sign of a mature organisation that's recognising it's not just about getting boxes ticked. It's about that developmental journey. I'm often asked how long it takes. It's really hard to say, but I allow about 5 days in total across a number of weeks to do the work. I think you need some time to go through the criteria, to go through the pro forma. Definitely need a day for the visit, and then you probably need a day in total to write the report up. So around about 5 days. Some colleagues say it takes them a bit less, some say it's a little bit more, but it's around that sort of level of commitment. Again, to pick up on Graham's point, it's absolutely essential that the senior staff are committed to the process. If the DOF and the deputy aren't engaged, it's not going to succeed. You need to make sure that happens pretty early on. I would say, again, it's not a CQC visit. You're not there to inspect and give a mark. You're there to see where a team is on the process, and you're having discussions with the team and not interviews. And finally, again, you need to sign everything off with the organisation. But going back to the point I made in my pre-break presentation, it's on your terms. If you're not happy, you've got to stand up and say, this isn't quite right, or this isn't quite the right piece of evidence. I'll say it again, that's happened to me once in 20 years of doing this. So it really isn't a major, major concern. And that's me done in terms of the presentation. I've hurried through that deliberately. There's quite a lot of detail there. We will share the slides with you. Does anyone have any particular questions that they'd like to pick up at this point? Graham?
It wasn't a question. I just wondered if you wanted me to comment on how we picked the people for our
yes,
thing,
please,
just because
our
approach was a little bit different. Yeah. Well, I mean, I say we picked them. We did pick the names, but actually a lot of it was driven by practicality. So by the time we decided, because we had 3 assessors for our level 3, by the time we decided which day that me and them were all available to be in, one place on there, it was also driven by who was available that day, who was on annual leave, who was on training, who could we actually get, because we're across 3 big sites, who could we get across to Glenfield for them to see them. So although we picked the names, actually a lot of it was driven more by practicalities of that than actually you must see these 5-6 people or whatever. And certainly for us, because we had to pick 50 people, we couldn't pick 50 perfect individuals who would say everything. And we did have a couple of people who we had one person in particular really didn't like that as part of our changes, one of our requirements was that band 7s have to be qualified, and someone had a real issue with that, shared it with the assessors, but obviously because it was one voice out of the 50 that was so it was they could apply the common sense and go, actually this person just doesn't get it, kind of thing on there. So some of it is you know, they could have picked who they wanted to see, but a lot of ours was more driven by the practicality of getting people on site, getting people in place to actually do it over the course of a whole day as well. You know, because it ended up being like 5 or 6 different individual meetings.
Yeah, and thanks, Graham. That's helpful. The point I would make is that in the one I'm doing at the moment, there are 30 people we've had to pick. We've picked those individuals, and some of them are on holiday, some of them aren't going to be available. So, yeah, at that point, the organisation just puts a substitute in. It's not a problem. You just need to be careful that you are getting genuine views from across the team, because, as we know, not everyone will be supportive. It's just impossible they would be. Are there any other questions around any of the detail that I've been through there in that, what my approach to it is? Richard?
Hi, yeah, thank you. It was just to check in terms of the assessor report. So there's several assessors, presumably just one report at the end. So when you've said about a day's time, I assume that there is a lead writer of it, but contributions from the others, and it's backwards and forwards, and then a common view shared back with the organisation.
Yes, absolutely. So I'm when I do an assessment, I realise that I'm quite fortunate, and I'm not in a day job which involves me having to do monthly year-end processes and so on and so forth. So I will often write the report and then share it with my colleagues, and we'll then, once we've agreed it, we'll then take that back to the organisation and get their view as well. Occasionally, I give colleagues a development opportunity and say they should write the report, because it'd be good for them as they develop their skills as an assessor. But yeah, it's one report written by all 3 assessors and agreed by the organisation.
Thanks.
Does that answer your question, Richard? Yeah.
Yes, thanks.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Fabulous. So as I say, we will share that presentation with you. If you receive that and have questions, don't hesitate to drop me a note. I'm always happy to answer any questions around this, around accreditation. So finally for today, I'm delighted to introduce Amy Denning, who is the Assistant Director of Finance at Bradford Teaching Hospitals. Those of you who are on the call just before we started again will have heard Amy and I chatting away. We've known each other for a little while, so thanks for joining us this afternoon, Amy. It's really great to be here. And you're going to talk about the benefits of being an assessor in this process. So without any further ado, over to you.
Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. I'm afraid I haven't brought any slides to hide behind, so I just thought I'd come and have a chat with you. So yeah, you'll just be able to see my face. So I've been an assessor for quite a while now. I shadowed one to start with, and that's one thing I would say about being an assessor. Make sure you get the opportunity to shadow one before you get right into it, because I learnt so much from that shadowing experience, and just following someone around and what have you. And then I've led on 2 since then. They've all been level 2 as well. I haven't done any level 3s yet. I was going to split down the benefits between a couple of different bits, really. Personal benefits, things that I've found benefit me from a personal point of view, and then professionally, because I think there's both. So if I start from a personal reflection, for me, it's really, really helped me build my networks. So I've met people from all over the country because I've been an assessor, and I've assessed their organisation, and I've got to know people, and I've kept those links and those networks going afterwards. Because I always say you can never know too many people in NHS finance. It's really, really beneficial to have all those links. And then as well, I find it really fulfilling because it's something outside the day job. And David hinted at this earlier. We've all got our heads in our spreadsheets and our accruals and whatever else you're doing on your day job. This is something different, and it is so different. I've got a real passion for people, and I really love getting out there and chatting to people and learning about the culture of the organisation, the behaviours in the teams, the development of the people, the training opportunities. There's a real focus on health and wellbeing. I'm a health and wellbeing champion, and then that's really important to me. So from a personal point of view, this is something that really, really links and aligns with my values, my personal values, and I get so much out of it. I really do. I find it so fulfilling doing this. Then from a professional point of view, I think the biggest one is the pinch with pride, and you'll have all heard this term throughout the ONF networks and things, but you can go out and you're finding out how people are doing things and all sorts of things. And you'll more often than not find things that actually you want to do, you want to introduce to your organisation. There's so many things that I've changed within organisations I've worked in since I've been an assessor, because I've found out how to do it differently through assessing other organisations. Funnily enough, the first one that I shadowed, it was shadowing Calderdale and Huddersfield's assessment. I was shadowing Ben Roberts, who was leading that assessment, who is now my Director of Finance, coincidentally. But at the same time, I was working at Airedale, and we were also working towards our level 2 accreditation. We did their assessment a few months before ours was due. There were so many things that I took from that assessment and then built into ours that we were doing in our organisation, which helped us get over the line. So I think there's a lot. We all work really hard, don't we? And why reinvent the wheel? If there's something that someone's doing that you're not necessarily doing, then take it back with you, introduce it to your organisation. I think the other thing I find as well is it reinforces what we're doing well, because sometimes you'll come across things that people aren't doing quite as well as you think you're doing. And that's something I find as an assessor as well. I like to tell people that if I come across something like that, if I do something a bit differently that I think they might benefit from. So it's sharing skills and ideas and how we all work. But it is quite satisfying to feel like actually I do that really well. The enthusiasm, people that you come across, I'm lying. I've come across one person that had no enthusiasm for this process at all. They had no interest. They didn't believe in it. They didn't want to be part of it. And that was one of the interviews that I did. Chats. But the enthusiasm you get from people, it's brilliant. People just want to show you what they're best at and what they do well. And the other bit is, it's quite reassuring to hear that you're not the only people and you're not the only organisation that's going through certain problems and stresses and strains. It's a difficult place to be, isn't it, NHS Finance at the moment? And I think getting out there and having conversations with other organisations, you get that assurance that it's not just you. Everybody's in the same boat. It's tough for everybody. And that is reassuring. For me, it certainly is. And then this is a bit daft really, but when else do you get the opportunity to have a conversation with a random Director of Finance about what they could do differently or better? You don't really, do you? So I quite like that. I quite like going into that conversation with the DOF at the end of the day to say, right, you're brilliant at this, your team are fab, but, and again, that's all part of that network and then developing those relationships. So they were the main benefits that I wanted to pull out. I also wanted to talk a little bit about the worries that I had before I put myself forward for an assessor, because I'm sure you guys on the call will have concerns and what have you. I had 3. One of them was the expectation on me. Am I expected to be the expert? No, I'm not. Nobody's an expert at everything, are they? I have quite a lot of experience in finance, particularly in financial management. But ask me a financial accounts question, I have absolutely no idea. But you're not an expert in everything, and you've got to remember it's a peer assessment. So you're going in and you're looking at what they're doing, and you're looking at the evidence that they're providing to prove what they're doing. A lot of it is around the culture and the behaviours rather than the technical side of things. So I think David mentioned before, there's a lot of grey in this. So you will interpret that evidence as you will. Some people might interpret differently to others, which is why it's handy to have another assessor on board with you. And the other thing is there's lots of support and experience across the assessor network as well. If you are unsure about a piece of evidence that someone submitted, whether it is meeting that criteria, then there's people you can reach out to and you can ask. It's not all on you. Another of my worries was the time and commitment that you have to put into it. And David broke this down quite nicely, actually, saying it's about 5 days. And I'd agree with that. It does take time. So you do need to make sure that you can commit to it and you can allocate that time out of your day. I do know some assessors that do it in their personal time. I've been lucky that I've been in organisations that have allowed me to do this within my working day, as long as I've structured it around my deadlines and what have you. But it is nice to break your day down as well, break your week up a little bit and do a bit of this in and amongst. I think Teams is brilliant because it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be out there meeting people in real life, but I also think that face-to-face element, there's nothing better. And then the third one, it's something that David brought up earlier. What if they aren't where they think they are? And that is difficult. I have come across that in one of the assessments that I did. The initial evidence that they supplied me, it was quite a way off actually. There was quite a lot of gaps after we've looked at it and assessed it. But when we started having conversations with the accreditation lead in the organisation, we actually found that they did have that evidence. They just hadn't thought to use it. They hadn't thought that it was evidence. They were doing these things, but they just hadn't considered how they would reflect it. So what started with, oh gosh, this is going to be a difficult conversation because actually they're not there, turned around very, very quickly into, well, actually, you are almost there. You have got this stuff. You just need to do a bit of a better job of collating that evidence and showing me it. And then that was supported even more when I got into the chats with the team, because you could really see that this stuff was happening and it was embedded. It was just really hard to put down on a piece of paper. And I know David said before about if you haven't got it, it's not evidence. But I did find that a lot of the evidence was cemented by those conversations. The conversations are key. And it's not a test either. So if you are having to have a difficult conversation with someone, you're not there to test them, you're there to work with them. You're not working against them. And that's what I've found. And I think I said it earlier, I've shared ideas and things that I've done that they might be able to implement quite easily to meet one of the requirements and vice versa. So you are working with them. You're not out to catch them out. You're not out to trip them up. You're not there to test them. You're there to work with them and support them in getting this accreditation. You don't want anybody to not fail, but not be quite ready, really. And I'm going to take a breath because I feel like I've just gone roof. Is there any questions or comments anyone wants to make on that? Conscious I've not taken a lot of time there.
No worry about that. I mean, I'll just pick up one thing, if I may, to begin with, which is that the thing about being an expert. I would absolutely agree with that. I've not worked in what you might call frontline finance now for 15, 20 years. I wouldn't know a grip and control check sheet if one came and hit me over the head, but that doesn't mean that I can't assess the culture in an organization. I can't see what it's like as a place to work. And that's what you're looking at, really. It's not about having that in-depth knowledge of every single process. You need to understand what NHS finance is about as a whole, but definitely not that real detailed knowledge. You're the expert on the process, not on NHS finance. Rebecca.
No, thanks, and thanks, Amy. That was absolutely brilliant to kind of really make it feel real in terms of what it involves. I was just wondering, like, two questions, really, like practical ones. Firstly, how many do you do a year? And then secondly, I understand it you work as part of maybe a team of assessors. How does that relationship work? Do you always work with the same people? Or how much time do you have to kind of work out who's going to do what and how you're going to work together?
Okay, so the first question, I did my 2 assessments. I did 2 in a year a couple of years ago, and then I haven't done one since because I've had other priorities, other pressures and what have you. So when you sign up to be an assessor, you'll get an email from the central team every time that they're looking for assessors for the next batch, and you can volunteer at that point. So you can do as many or as few as you can fit in. And it will, like, I find that I can't tend to do them around year end and what have you, because it just conflicts with my role and reporting and what have you. But December tends to be quite a good time for me to do an assessment because I've got a little bit more capacity at that point. So you work around what works for you, Rebecca. There's no strict rules around it. And then from a team of assessors, I haven't worked with the same assessor twice. So you get allocated, the central team allocate who's going to assess which organisation. I suppose if you wanted to work together again, I'm sure you could put that ask in and then support that if they could support it. But I quite like having a different person to do it with each time because you get to know someone new again. The way we've structured it, the 2 that I've led on because the person doing it with me has been shadowing it rather than being a qualified assessor, for want of a better way of describing that. So I've kind of taken the lead and I've structured it, but the way we've done it both times is the evidence has been shared with us both. once via Teams, once over a SharePoint option. And we've both assessed the evidence separately. So we've gone away and done our own RAG rating of it. And then we've come together and spent some time and looked at where we've had differences and why we've had differences and how we've interpreted it and what have you. Because that gives you a little bit of reassurance as well, that it's not just you that thinks that, other people think that as well. When we've had the meetings, we've done the meetings together. So we've had the chats together. We haven't done those separately. And we've kind of separated who's going to ask which questions and what have you. But we found that really, really useful. Just because you can hear things a little bit differently as well, can't you? And just that's the way we've structured it. I think if I had 50 people, I'd potentially structure it a little bit differently, but I haven't had an organisation that big, so we have been able to do the meetings together. Once we've done the meetings, we've both gone off and written up what we've found out of the meetings and how we think that's supported some of the evidence that we wanted a bit more information on. So we've done that separately and then come back together. And then I've usually taken responsibility for writing the report, sent it to the other assessor. They've added their bits, changed bits. We've come together and finished it off and sent it. So that's how we've structured it in. I've structured it in the past, but I'm sure there's other ways that'll be done. David might have a different example of how he's structured ones he's done.
That's brilliant. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, so just to pick up on that, we nearly always appoint a senior assessor or a lead assessor, and they'll tend to be the ones that pull things together. And that, as Amy said, if we can, we try to get someone shadowing us so that we can bring more assessors through. So the one that I referred to earlier, there's actually 4 assessors on that. We're doing the Liverpool University Foundation Trust, which is a big hospital in this part of the world. We've got myself and 2 relatively experienced assessor. One of whom is my line manager, which is an interesting dynamic. Then we've got a relatively junior member of staff who we're introducing to help her understand how the process works. So yeah, you can do it in many ways, Rebecca. I think, as Amy's made clear, there's no hard and fast rules. There's an expectation you'll help if you can, but there's also an acknowledgement that, you know, if you're working in the final accounts process, you're not going to be around between March and May, so there's no point even asking you to do an assessment at that point. As for teams, I think it might be asking you a bit too much to say, could you be with the same people all the time? What we do try to do is to make sure that if you go from level 2 to level 3, as Graham referred to, if you can keep one of the assessment team in that journey, that helps, because that person's got the background knowledge about the organisation. But again, that might not be possible.
It's funny you should ask that as well, because there's someone on this call that's hoping to shadow me on my next assessment. So you can organise it that way if you want.
Excellent. Does that answer your question, Rebecca? Great stuff. Okay, thank you. So are there any final questions that anybody wants to raise? I think it's very interesting that Amy talks about her fears. I think it's understandable that when you're going to something new, there are things you're not going to be 100% sure about. I will make the point that Amy, myself, Natasha, Sophie from the National Central Team, lots of other assessors will support you. We're always here to offer guidance and advice. I don't do it all that often, but whenever I'm asked to, I'm very, very happy to provide that piece of information where it's been requested. Okay, one final chance to ask any questions you've got. Okay, Natasha, we will circulate the presentations that we hid behind, to use Amy's words, to make sure that you get to see those. And any questions at all, please come back to either myself or Graham. We'd be very happy to pick those up with you.